Welcome to Filmmakers Feedback, a program brought to you by Film Scoring Tips. I am Giovanni Rotondo and I will be your host for this series. The episodes are available as podcasts on all the major platforms and in video form. Make sure you visit filmscoringtips.com to find more info about that. The mission of this show is to better understand the relationship between filmmakers and composers and to find ways to increase one's chances creating long-lasting professional bonds. In today's episode, you can hear the super interesting chat I had with film editor Pia Di Ciaula, filmmaker Alexander Bodin Saphir, and film composer Michael Price during Film Scoring Tips' first birthday party held in September at the Spitfire audio headquarters in London. Thanks for tuning in. Enjoy the show.
Without further ado, Bodin Saphir.
During the years, there were many crucial events that changed the industry we work on, the film and TV industry, from the advent of color and sound to technological advancements such as CGI and 3D, and the switch from film to digital. All of these culminated in 2018 with more and more companies announcing they were starting to adhere to the philosophy of video on demand and doing so with their own platforms. And in this scenario, we could see a future made of more and more content being made, more and more music being needed, and new rules. New rules means also new questions. And so I noticed many of my colleagues and many of you, in fact, resorting to Facebook and online groups and online forums to find answers. And I thought, and I did the same. And I thought it would be great to have a platform where we could all share knowledge together, but in a way that is organized, where information is easy to find. And so with this spirit, 1 year ago, Film Scoring Tips was born. In the beginning, it was only me. And then I'm blessed with many kind and talented friends. And little by little, I asked them to participate and provide content. And little by little, this child of mine became a joint venture, the voice of many. So tonight I'd like to share with you some data and in fact some achievements that we can celebrate together. First of all, Film Scoring Tips is a blog, a podcast and a webcast. It's also a series of online classes and starting from tonight, a series of events. We count 35 among our guests and authors. We published 65 articles. We gathered 12,300 visitors during the year, and our pages were visited 21,600 times. I just, this morning I got all the data and I was pretty shocked. And the next one is one that really, it's a big one. Our visitors come from 124 countries. Now, if you think that the world has 204, that's a pretty impressive piece of data. Thank you. Number one being the US, number two being the UK. And our social following counts 1,250 followers among all the platforms with an organic reach of 112,000. And then there were two moments that were really dear to me. The first one was when actor Mark Hamill liked one of our tweets, and you can see it here. This was part of a fun weekly beat that we'll probably start doing again. And then the other one, and Pia knows that, she remembers every time, because I think I called you right away. Hans Zimmer liked one of our Facebook posts, and that was I was mind blown. All right, this brings me to the three people that were key players in our first year, and that are my guests tonight on the panel. Each of them represents an important stage of the film music creation path. Pia Di Ciaula is a BAFTA award-winning film editor. Her credits include Tyrannosaur, A Very English Scandal, and Netflix's series The Crown. She has written 4 amazing articles. Well, that would be 3, but one is separated in 2 parts. And they are in the series titled Film Editors and Music. Thank you for being here, Pia. If you can join me. Alexander Bodin Saphir is the successful film producer, writer, and director of Who's Gonna Love Me Now and Far, and playwright of the acclaimed Rosenbaum's Rescue. He has been the first guest of our podcast, Filmmakers Feedback, and I'm very happy to introduce you on the stage. Thank you for being here, Alexander. Michael Price is an Emmy Award-winning and BAFTA-nominated composer. His credits include the acclaimed TV series Sherlock and Unforgotten, and the upcoming BBC Dracula adaptation, which we are very much looking forward to. Michael's article on gear addiction is essential, smart, and fun. Thank you for coming, Michael. All right. Among the various tips that we published this year, there is one that I like to quote. It's from the top performing article currently, written by Dario Marianelli, and it goes like that. Having the editor on your side is invaluable, and they might be able to forewarn you of possible pitfalls before you put your foot wrong. An editor deals with pacing and structure, trying to enhance emotion and create a sense of forward flow. That, when you think about it, is exactly what a composer does as well. Editing is the closest relative of composing. Don't get on the editor's wrong side. So, Pia, what should a composer do to be on your good side?
Well, first of all, Dario is amazing. He's written some killer scores. So, well, I think the collaboration between an editor and composer is so important. We're both trying to get the most emotion, get the rhythm, just bring out the narrative. So when we work together closely, it can be magic. I've had positive and negative experiences, but we can discuss those in a minute. I think an editor usually knows the film better than anybody, even the director, because we're dealing with frames, we're restructuring, and we see it with fresh eyes. We're not biased by what has happened on set, arguments that have gone on behind the scenes. So we're really unbiased viewers. We know every nuance that the director wants out of the performances. We know the overall vision that they want. And so we spend months with the directors in a room together. So we learn quite a bit. So all this knowledge goes into creating a temp track that is very difficult to do because it's time consuming, and trying to find the right tracks for scenes is just mind-boggling at times. So it's important for the editors and composers to work in harmony so that we can discuss why a certain track was chosen. And it could be a very tiny thing of it. It could be just one instrument that moves me, or so I think that it's a key relationship, and the collaboration is invaluable.
Thank you. Alexander, in episode 1 of the podcast, you mentioned your go-to person when you need a fresh pair of ears or a second opinion on music is the editor. And I'm wondering, have you ever hired a composer based on an editor either endorsing the person or using the person's music on the temp track?
Definitely. I mean, always. I think the first person you talk to about the music is obviously the editor, and if they don't recommend them, if they don't endorse them, then you move on to the next person. I mean, I've worked with editors who have a musical background, and I find that really useful. I don't only work with editors who have a musical background, but I find that. Do you have a musical background?
I played guitar when I was 10.
That's a musical background. That counts. Absolutely, absolutely.
It does.
No,
Yeah.
because there's no absolutely, because there's something about rhythm. There's something that when you're a kid, you sponge that up. And editing is about rhythm, and music, and the combination of the two. And I feel that it's really important to have the music of the film in the images as soon as possible. So yes, absolutely.
Cool. After the editor finishes putting together the temp score, little by little the music is replaced by the score composed by the composer. And these are often not finalized pieces, but mock-ups, we call them, which means, I'm sure most of you know that, but it means computer simulations of what the music will sound like once the performances will be recorded by real musicians. And this usually involve cutting-edge technology and sample libraries, plugins, etc. In fact, technology is an essential part of most media composers' workflow nowadays. Michael, in your article, you estimated only a small part of the gear a composer buys is in fact essential. And this is a very delicate space to talk about these things. You showed us how restraining ourselves from impulsively purchasing gear results in saving money, first of all, but most importantly, allows us to save time, thus improving the quality of our lives. How long has it been since you started limiting gear purchases? And by improving the quality of your life, do you feel you also improved the quality of your music?
This is like an Alcoholics Anonymous, isn't it? This is a gear. I've been clean for not that long. I think the broader context of it, I think, has been shown beautifully by Pia and Alexander, because what everybody in a filmmaking team is trying to do is to try and communicate with each other. So when an editor or a director or a producer, when you're in a room with someone and you're talking about music, then we should really be trying to have as few barriers between us as possible, of which technology should be one that we get out of the way really, really quickly. So it really should be something that we, I think, certainly in my opinion, as composers, we should have tried to absorb the technology that we use in the same way that we would an instrument, such that it becomes absolutely transparent. So that if I was honored enough to be in a room with Pia, I would be talking about the feeling in the scene. I'd be talking about the story and about the characterization. And I would be trying to have as little bandwidth as possible for thinking about what the technical processes behind that would be. And also I feel that you can demonstrate, in terms of thinking about mock-ups, you can demonstrate your idea to a 90% level with 10% of the technology that we have, because genuinely sort of twatting about with articulations is not going to be the thing that will really improve the communication of the artistic idea. Now, that I think is to try and set into context what I think is most important in writing music for film and for TV, which is about being part of a storytelling team, and then bringing to that team your service, the gift then that you bring is the ability to try and bring that story to life. Having said all of that, because I think that is the biggest thing and almost the only thing, then there's this small area over here which is, and it's great if you can make things sound extraordinarily good as well. But that's sort of taken for granted in a way. And I think sometimes it's just about the framing that as composers, because we exist in a commercial framework, of course, then it's very easy for the messages that we get to be a lot about, if you buy some more stuff, you will be better, you will feel better. It doesn't matter whether it's about clothes or hair or your car or whatever the thing is. We're surrounded by advertising messages, of course, and I think the point of writing the article, apart from being bloody minded, was just to try and reinforce both to myself. So to answer your question directly, I haven't really bought anything new for a year, and that has been really cool. I haven't missed it. In fact, I had lunch with my old friend Stephen Price, no relation, who did music for Gravity, and we were both sitting there having a delicious lunch, saying that we both used 7-year-old computers and they were absolutely fucking fine, thanks very much. And neither of us had felt the need to upgrade, because that really wasn't the most important thing that was going on right now. Now, we both already had powerful computers, so we're not sitting there working on a pocket calculator. So there is there's a point that we've reached. But I think what I stumblingly tried to do in writing a piece for your wonderful site was to try and reframe the directional focus of myself, by using myself as an example, but also of all my wonderful composer colleagues, just to remind us that it's like 99% about story and 1% about what plugins you're using. Mm-hmm. Maybe 1% is generous, 0.5%. That's what I think.
Thank you. That's enlightening. So, Pia, in part 1 of your series, you advised film editors that the articles were aimed at film editors to give them tips on how to approach music and the temp score in particular. And you advised them to, when they're putting together a temp score, to keep the music unresolved. And I'm quoting you, like a question mark instead of a period. That's beautiful, actually. I think it's a great advice for composers as well. I'm wondering, is the end of the movie a good place for resolution? And have there been other places where resolution proved a useful device?
Well, first of all, this came about because I was watching a film I was cutting, and I had put a temp score on, and I found it a bit boring and just kind of repetitive. So I realized that it was because most of the cues were being resolved. So it was almost like putting a punchline at the end of every sentence. And subconsciously, it felt like scenes were finished, and it felt like we weren't being propelled into the next scene. So by not resolving the music in several places, it felt better, and it felt like the narrative was being driven in a more cohesive way. I think, of course, there are times when you should and can resolve music. For instance, when if a subplot or a plot is being resolved, that could be a good place for resolution. If a character has their final scene, you might want to send them off and resolve that character. But sometimes now, even at the end of films, they don't resolve the music because it's alluding to a sequel. And I think it keeps it keeps you fresh and interested in what's going on. And it keeps you, really interested. So
lovely. And I love that as you know, we met thanks to Michael Danna, and there was one time where Michael was speaking to students of mine online through Skype, and I asked him, is there one tip you want to give to young composers? And the answer was, don't resolve. Try not to resolve in music too often.
I didn't know that.
I know, I never told you. I know, but yeah, I love that. And when I read your article, I was like, wow, that's very cool. All right. Alexander, temp music on versus temp music off when you show a composer a cut of the movie. Which one has yielded best results for you?
Which one has yielded less heartache? I think, to be honest, I think it's the director that's the problem in that scenario, because directors, editors as well, but directors more often, I feel, this is generalizing obviously, but there's a tendency to fall in love with your temp track, to not always see past it, and when a great composer comes along and gives you a great track, you might not, it doesn't quite do what the temp track did, you know. I mean, Stanley Kubrick is a great example. He fell in love with the temp track of 2001, and he had some amazing score that could have, and some say maybe should have, gone on. Ideally for me, I want and it's not a workflow possibility, but I want my editor and I want my composer on set. I want them there so they can see and feel and already start cutting and composing. I would love that to give the composer the opportunity to just give a first blush, to give a first, just throw down. And we've worked on some projects where that's what you've done. You've just given some music, and it's actually informed some of the work that we've done. And I would love that. I love playing music on set, like David Lynch does in Lost Highway. Literally, the music, the Trent Reznor that is in the film was being played on location, on set while they were shooting, to get the actors into the right space. So ideally, you wouldn't have the need for a temp track, but it's not always the case. So a temp track is sometimes, the only way to try and communicate something, and also gives the editor some kind of structure to work with. But like people were saying, that the temp track, as long as you can explain that the temp track is what it is about it that moves you, like you said, it could just be a musical, an instrumentation, or it could just be the rhythm, or it could just be something really superficial that you're hanging on to. And as long as the composer then understands that and you're able to communicate that as a director and an editor, then fine. But I honestly believe that in those situations it's the director that's the problem, because the director often has seen that cut so often and can't necessarily see past what has now become the music that's associated with the image. It's not a very good answer, I'm sorry.
No, it's actually great, and it helps me a lot transitioning to the next one, because the next one is about temp love, and so I'd like to know from Michael if you have ever incurred into the temp love deadlock, and if so, how you escaped it, how you managed to find a solution. And you explained pretty much what temp love is, but maybe you could further formulate for the audience, for those who don't know.
Well, I think Alexander and Pia described it perfectly, and actually described the utility of why there would be temp music in the first place, and what the importance of it is. And then consequently, I think the idea that composers resist any form of communication from their director or their filmmaker is kind of setting yourself up to have a tough time anyway, because I think it's the one area of expertise, the one department that some directors find the most deeply stressful of all, because they have a language to talk to a DOP, they have a language to talk to an editor, they have a language to talk to producers, production designers, and then these mysterious wizards and wizardesses walk in with a language all of their own, which we instinctively know music to be. And as a group of heads of department, composers can be precious and weird. And so we will come in and we can be a bit kind of like, oh, actually that's not an oboe. You've been saying it's an oboe, but I think you'll find it's a cor anglais. Thank you. And all of which puts a distance between you and the and your colleagues on the film. So to directly answer your question, of course, I spend a good half of the year with sticky bits of temp, shall we say, where there's been something in the temp, you've spotted it, whatever it is, film, TV show, with the director and the execs and the editors and everybody that needs to have an opinion. You've done your first draft, and the note that comes back is usually a sort of positive sandwich of why it's not as good as the temp is. So it's sort of like, I love your work, you're a genius, everything's lovely, but there's something about the temp that you're not quite getting, comma, I still think you're lovely. And so you get that for a few weeks until the positive sandwiches start to fall off and you just get the middle bit, it's not as good as the temp, and then it gets quiet and then you get fired and then they get Lon Balfe to do it. But there's a sense of trying to understand at a deeper level. Usually when anyone is resistant about anything, is holding on tight to something, it's because in that situation you're not getting something. You're not getting something about the bigger picture. If the director's feeling that you're not addressing what they want you to address, often it means you're not actually listening. You're holding on to an idea that you've got, and they're trying to say something to you, and they're trying to say it to you via the medium of going, it's not like the temp. And I think there's a lot of times that we can just take a step back and try and diffuse. The sort of practical advice, if it's useful, is to try and practically diffuse this blocking communication, which is usually what sort of temp love, as people would describe, becomes. And so as with any sort of human interaction, you sometimes have to sort of disrupt the way it's been. Mm-hmm. So if you've been communicating on email, stop doing that. Have a drink with a person, go and see them in person, drop into the cutting room. If you've been sending them quick times and they've been watching them in their hotel room and they're feeling sad and not heard, invite them to your studio so that you can play them to something, and you can be open and you can share and you can go, hey, it feels like maybe this sound. You can try things out with them, but you're trying to, I think often a blockage on being close to the temp is just a signifier of a block in that particular relationship. And I think just doing the same thing that you were doing and hoping that if you change that chord 4 to a chord 6 and maybe put it down an octave and hope it will go away, it's usually deeper than that.
That's great advice. I can't wait to try it. Thank you for giving it. All right, so do we have any question? I'm gonna repeat the question on the mic so that we have it on recording. Is the temp love caused by over repetition and directors being very familiar with the track and hearing it over and over again?
I think that's part of the problem for all of us too, and editors, because we've lived with it for months. Like, I start temp tracking during the shoot, and I'll be cutting for like 4, 5, 6 months on a film. So, and if it works, I just keep it. I change it every few months if it's not working perfectly. But I think it's true, and it's fear of the unknown too. When I hear the first the first sketches for the composer and it's not exactly what I had, I usually don't say anything. And I live with it for a bit. And then, I hear what they were trying to achieve, and then you do come around, because you do have to detach yourself from the temp score, which is why I prefer not to let the composers hear the temp score. I want their fresh take on the film and what they hear in their heads, and instead of having temp that is associated with so many other films. And on the first season of The Crown, we had Hans Zimmer and Rupert Gregson-Williams scoring, and my temp track. So we had The World Was Our Oyster. So I used, for one of my piece, the king has died, and the queen has become queen, and she's leaving Kenya, and I used the score from Gladiator. And Rupert came to my cutting room and he said, "Do you realize that piece took 1 whole year to compose?" I said, "No, good luck with that." And he really delivered. It was beautiful what he did, and it suited the scene, and it was just outstanding. So in that case, he did rise to the challenge, but it was a huge mountain to climb.
What do you think?
No, I think Pia.
She did. Michael, do you? Yeah.
I've always, you'd have to take the mic away from me. I have lots of opinions on this. I think Pia described incredibly articulately one of the essential problems, which is time and process. Because if you give a composer, either because they're replacing another composer or just because of the post-production schedule, a very short amount of time, then really you only have time for one cycle. And so that cycle, so say if you're coming on late on a feature film and you've got 3 weeks to do 60 minutes of music, then really you've only got time for one turn round, and that is basically, what's the temp? What do I think? I'm going to do what I think with reference to the temp, and so long as it gets past everybody, then that's sort of what gets on the film. And the overriding feeling then is one of sort of satisfaction that there is some music on the film and it's out in the cinema, rather than that was a satisfying process which developed and evolved. I think the process, or my experience of the process when there isn't any temp, which is much more satisfying, is that's a much longer process, because you then need, as a production team, to have the space and time for me to send you some first demos or a suite or some sketches, and for the director and the producers and the editor to live with those for a while, as you describe, and then try them in a few places, and then maybe sort of put them into different scenes that you'd not even thought that cue was going to go in there. And then you iterate and you do another pass and you do another pass. And my experience of that longer process is that actually that neutralizes the sense of what the temp originally was. Because each time that you go round as a team together, the temp that may have originally been in just recedes into the rear view mirror. And often, if you've got 6 months, nobody can remember what the temp was, because you've actually spent an equal amount of time then with the new score. And so I think fundamentally a lot of the problems that composers that we'd all experience with temp is because of constricted post-production schedules, where it's just not possible to have this evolution that you need. And so consequently, I actually, if I've got a truncated post-production schedule, definitely ask for the temp, because I've only got one shot, and I kind of need to know what everybody's agreed, and that you didn't want brass band and choir and bagpipes, and you'd already gone through that loop. And so it can be a shortcut. If the set, the script, if we can write early, then that opens up a whole world of evolving something unique for your project, which I think is what we'd all hope to do, really.
Thank you so much. very quickly, I shared some of the things we have done during this year, and I'd like to share some of the things we will do over the next year. First of all, we have a new game music series coming up. This is a series of articles, and this will open the way for more game music content. Then I'm very excited about this. Next Monday, I'm gonna publish an interview that I gave to Richard Kraft, the composer agent, and this is about participating in forums and Facebook groups, of which he is an ace. So make sure you read it. And in the next few months, we are designing a series of challenges, a few of which, maybe one, maybe a couple, will be done in collaboration with Spitfire Audio. So really, you should check them. There will be prizes to be won. So yes, sorry, this goes a little bit against what we just talked about. But yeah, we're weak. Lastly, there is a new area of the website that we are opening soon with downloadable content that will help professionals in their work. So this will be videos, video files, spreadsheets, PDFs, etc. All right, I'd like to, first of all, to thank my guests on the panel. Thank you so much for being here. And all the people who collaborated with Film Scoring Tips so far, and I see a few familiar faces here: Marianne Fisher, Steve Lewis, Tristan Noon, is Robert Drain. Yeah, oh, there you are, Robert. Thank you. Robert was the first guest author of the blog. Thank you so much, and thank you for being readers, listeners, and for being here tonight. It's very important to me. And then I'd like to thank Spitfire Audio for hosting this event and for the continued support. Toby Gale, thank you so much for helping me get this event real. And on this note, there is a small surprises. There will be, check your emails in the next few days. There will be a discount, an exclusive discount on Spitfire Audio's catalog. And last but not least, I'd like to thank my wife, Federica, who is the marketing, she's the marketing brain behind most of the social campaigns of Film Scoring Tips, and she agreed to shoot the video and edit it, so you'll find it soon on the platform. But above all, she baked some of the delicious food that you will find along with the cake in a few minutes. So thank you all, and enjoy the rest of the evening. That's our show for today. Amazing guests are joining me on the next episodes. One way to be updated on the podcast's programming is to like and follow our Facebook page. Type facebook.com/filmscoringtips on your browser to find it. Now go create something special. I'll see you soon.